If you haven't had drinks with your buddies and played video games, it's the best.
It's okay to not need every moment of your day to be like about improving. It's okay to just like veg out and play video games and watch YouTube. Like, you will survive.
What is one sort of reoccurring theme that you feel like pops up a lot throughout your life?
I think a lot of people settle for good enough, or they say, well, this is how I've always been.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking part in this immersive listening experience. A meaningful existence is a moving target that, no matter how close, will always be out of reach. We hope this message finds you with an outstretched hand. As we attempt to uncover complex truths, remember, life's toughest questions can be answered if we all just focus on one thing: being good people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good People episode 65. My guest today is Kaity Mason. She is a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo, a personal trainer, CrossFit coach, and has her CrossFit Level 2 certification. In today's episode, expect to learn about Kaity's interest in martial arts from a young age, the 100-pound weight loss transformation that she went through, some of the challenges that coaches face on a day-to-day, and the importance of not being scared to try something new. If you guys are on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. If, while you're listening, you enjoy the conversation, please consider sending it to someone who you think would enjoy it too. Without further ado, enjoy the show. Kaity, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to do this. We've known each other digitally for quite some time, and I feel like anytime that you post something on Instagram, there's like this mutual nod of respect because we're both super into like the philosophical martial art, do hard things thing. And I'm excited to dig into some of these topics with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, long time coming.
Yeah, for sure. Something that I'm curious about, and I've been trying to do this more with the show, is this idea of good people. I think what makes this show fun for me is when I get to interview people and learn specifically about them. Like, I interview a lot of researchers and things like that, but I think there's so many good people in the world, and everybody sort of has their own story to share. And no matter, what you've accomplished or what you've done or how many tallies you've added to your resume, I think that, fundamentally a lot of people have things that they want to share. And I feel like I'm excited to dig into that sort of like life story, lessons learned type stuff with you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm excited to have a chat.
Let's get started with just like, where did you grow up? What were the kind of things that you were interested in and doing as a kid?
Sure, yeah. So I was born in Peoria, Illinois, but we moved to Gainesville, Florida around 7 or so. I've been here ever since. Actually getting ready to move. So that's a big just wrench thrown at me because I've been here so long. But yeah, growing up, basically it's pretty simple. I really wanted to be a Power Ranger. That was kind of the start of everything. My parents put me into martial arts, and from there it just kind of threw everything else that I had planned out the window, sports wise, academics wise, and I just kind of leaned into that. Did the martial arts thing for a very long time growing up, and yeah, it kind of just shaped everything that I have done and thought of since then.
Cool. Yeah, I did Taekwondo as a kid. Like I think a lot of American kids. And I don't remember how far I got. I didn't get my black belt. I was a few off, but I was like 13, 14 or whatever. And I've always been interested in like especially Eastern Asian philosophy and martial arts and Bruce Lee films and all that sort of stuff, right? Doing jujitsu now. And it's so crazy that, yeah, it's so crazy how that just shapes, I don't know, it just shapes your worldview. Like everything that I feel like is through a lens that is very almost stoic in nature. And I think it's cool that I see that definitely in you. You share sort of the same outlook, and it sounds like you have identified that that's from the martial arts background.
Absolutely. And I think it actually took me a while to realize that, right? Like everything I consumed as a kid was kind of martial arts based. Like I said, I joke that I wanted to be a Power Ranger, but like every episode of Power Rangers is about like doing the right thing and helping out people. And I'm a big Star Wars nerd, and that's all Star Wars is about, is like being the best version of yourself and building a platform for others to grow and succeed on. And that's what martial arts is about. So I think, I was that kid who like hid behind my mom's leg and didn't want to talk to anyone before I started martial arts. And then now I'm quite obnoxious and not afraid to talk to literally anyone, which has helped me a lot in life and career. And, I don't think it was until I was like 20, maybe older, before I realized that, that was really all stemming from martial arts and that background. So it's definitely shaped a lot of what I believe in.
Yeah. Tell me, when did, this more, I feel like you and I have almost a similar approach where like I played sports growing up. It was just pretty, I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, but like I was pretty average at a lot of the sports that I played. I didn't really excel at any one in particular. I just sort of liked playing sports, playing video games. I was interested in a lot of different things. And um, fitness became more of a focus for me as the art itself after I had gone to college, because I was going to school and I didn't really have any outlet in terms of sports or teams or whatever to play. And so I started looking for that via fitness, working out in the gym by myself. I got into ultra running at that time, and then CrossFit followed shortly after. So when was that, crossover for you? When did it shift from like doing the sport, doing that thing, to almost emerging into adulthood? You took on fitness as like the main thing.
Yeah, my path was like super not linear. I did the martial arts thing until like mid teens. And then really from there, I just kind of like fell off the path, is how I would describe it. Like life happens. I helped raise my nephew. My mom got sick a couple of times. Like life gets in the way. And then, about 6 years ago, I woke up I was up in the middle of the night watching the Karate Kid actually. And at this point, I was probably 270 on a 5'1" frame. I mean, I was pretty large, and I was just like, I'm so unhappy. And I always point to the weight because I lost about 100 pounds from that point on. But really, it was more about how I was feeling. And I tell people, I spent 26 years of my life hating myself, and I don't ever want to go back there, and wanted to make a change. And I started working out. I started doing martial arts again, and just kind of turned it around. And I realized how powerful fitness can be. And then I found CrossFit, and that really jumpstarted everything, because it is kind of the cheat code to health and wellness. And yeah, so it just kind of took off from there. But, I'm really grateful for all of that perspective that got me there. I think a lot of the time I'm like, man, I wish I had done this when I was younger. We have a kid in town she's 18, went to the teen CrossFit games a couple times. She's a stud. She's a good kid. And I'm like, damn, like that would have been cool, but that's not the hand I was dealt. And I'm really grateful for the journey I have had getting to fitness.
Well, first of all, like I think the 100-pound weight loss, like that's nothing to just gloss over. That's an exceptional feat in and of itself. And I think that, I started fitness similarly. I went from like 210 to like 160
Awesome.
roundabout when I was between my sophomore and my junior year of high school. And it was similar, like I went my whole life kind of, I hate to use the term like didn't like myself, because I definitely did. I was playing video games, spent a lot of time inside. I had friends. It was just the habits that made me out of shape and unfit. Right. And, but I did get to a certain point where like, I kind of looked at myself in the mirror and I was just not happy. I wanted to do something different. I always, again, admired like the martial arts stuff and like, small guys with the six packs doing like crane kicks and, cool stuff like that. Right. And it was, I'm curious about your experience with this, because mine, I can't even really remember at this point, but I don't remember ever like flipping the switch. Like, this is going to be it. It's the time now. It was just like I started going to the gym, and slowly over time, I sort of built the habit and resilience that when I didn't feel like it, I still went anyways. And I was being a little bit more disciplined with the quantity and the quality of the food that I was eating. And that was kind of it. And I'm curious for you, like, it sounds like you had this one specific moment where it's like, I'm doing it now. But what did those next couple of weeks and months look like in terms of actually making those changes sustainable? And what was your mindset like during that time?
Yeah, I think I'm really lucky in that way that I did kind of have that moment that I can harken back to. I actually sent an email that night. Like you, I did Taekwondo all growing up. And then we had like a local small, like just kind of run down karate studio in town. And I wanted to try karate instead because probably I was watching the Karate Kid and I'm like a one track brain person. So I like emailed the sensei. I was like, hey, I want to stop by, check your place out. So I actually have that email. So I have like a very specific day that I can say I like, figured it out. From there, it was interesting because I didn't like sign up for a gym membership the next day. It was probably like a week or two later. I tried out the studio and really enjoyed it. And I think despite having the habits create like this not great version of myself, like you said, I think I had that dog in me. I think we're born with that. You can definitely cultivate some of that, but I think some people just kind of are born with that. And I immediately just kind of wanted to be the best version of myself and the best person in the room. And I was like crazy overweight and would get nauseous and dizzy when we would like do things for 10 minutes straight. So I was like, something has to change. And that's really when I started like leaning into the fitness side of it. Just got like a global gym membership, started going and just doing like the machine circuit. They always have the like 10,
Mm-hmm.
it's like leg extension and a curl and a lat pull down and crap like that. And started doing that, started walking on a treadmill, just chipping away at it. And, kind of found myself over time, losing the weight, changing the mindset, working harder, working longer. And, that's really what it's all been about since then. And it was a clear transition to CrossFit once I found it too.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I want to get to that in a second. Something I'm curious about. So when I went through this, I was like 15 or 16 at the time. And I felt like my journey was very much just learning like how to do the right things. Like I didn't know what a macronutrient was. I didn't know what a calorie was. I didn't know that there was different kinds of programming. Like I went to the gym and my brother showed me how to work out and he was on the baseball team. So it was very like powerlifting, bodybuilding type stuff, and I didn't know how to train intensely. Like I just kind of went and moved, right? And I had played soccer my whole life, so we never touched the weight room. I swam late in high school. We barely touched the weight room, and so a lot of it for me in that those couple months that I was going through that was just me trying to learn as much as I could. Like, okay, how do I actually do this appropriately? And I would even say that like from the age of 15 to 16, when I lost all that weight, it was more to do with just obviously the amount of calories that I was consuming. I just cut that down pretty drastically, stopped drinking soda, those things. And I didn't really learn a lot about training specifically until I started pursuing CrossFit at 19, 20, 21. Those years were really fundamental for me in getting a lot of good information and laying the foundation. It sounds like you kind of had a good plan, like the daily movement, the getting some strength training in, the going and doing the karate seemed to be like the community focused thing for you. Would you agree with that? Or do you feel like that when you started it, when that flip switched, when you were watching Karate Kid, you kind of didn't know what to do and you just started anyways?
Yeah, I think it was like a little bit of both. I kind of had an idea of what I was supposed to do. Like, I think we've both consumed a lot of like cheesy 80s martial arts films, it sounds like. And in each awesome training montage, like, they're picking up logs and they're squatting with them and doing all the crazy crap. And YouTube is an incredible resource. I tell people, as a trainer now, yeah, I did it by myself. Do you need a trainer? No, not necessarily always, but you're going to get better results faster that way. And yeah, I lost 100 pounds over X amount of months, but if I knew what I was doing, in theory, I probably could have, lost them better in a better way, faster in a more healthy way. I did a lot of cutting down, what I was eating, probably more than I should have. That's a big one that I always point out to people. But YouTube is an amazing resource. I'm a big YouTube psycho. It's like the only subscription service I pay for is premium, so I don't have commercials, kind of thing. But I just started kind of consuming a lot of like fitness content on the internet, like the Christian Guzmans, Nick Bears of the world that do a really good job of giving quick advice, even though sometimes it's we try to make it one size fits all, but it really works. The just getting up and moving and not eating like an asshole is pretty much what I typically tell people is the key to kind of jumpstart in the journey.
Yeah, I think that's pretty sound advice. And I think to touch on that, I guess from two angles is like, number one, that's a super simple thing to say and give and do. But two, you mentioned like you'd seen enough 80s martial arts movies. Like it's so funny that I still feel like all of I'll just come up with like for the next 30 days, 60 days, I'm going to do X physical task and try to like PR every single day. And I feel like in nature, that's pretty much what the CrossFit methodology is, right? It's like keep track of everything, try to always sort of PR. For whatever reason, I've always been really horrible at planks and I'm trying to improve my planking. Like literally, I
Nice.
can't, if it's a minute and a half, I'm like, I'm good. If you told me to plank max effort, it would be like under a minute, like not good. Okay.
That's tough.
And that's literally it. It's like I'm just gonna plank once a day, and I'm gonna try to do a little bit more every single time. And I think that people don't realize that the bar for improving your fitness is literally that low. Just like pick one thing and do it for a little while, and then get better at it, and you'll sort of build that reward cycle of setting a goal, accomplishing it, and then setting a new one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in just because. Like, I love the plank thing because that is really how I live my life now and how I still train and how I trained back then. Like, on Sunday, I did a 20-mile ruck with 30 plus pounds on my back that I had been training for, literally just because. And I was totally thrashed the last couple of days, blisters everywhere. And a lot of my friends who don't do fitness, are like, why? And I'm like, I don't really have an answer for you. I just wanted to prove that I could. Like, I don't have anything better than that. And sometimes it really is that simple. Like, you just got to do things just because. But I do think that's where the barrier of entry is sometimes for people because it's hard to get up off the couch when you're new to fitness for just because. You got to find that why. And luckily, like I feel like I've always had in retrospect good whys. I think it took me a long time to get there though. There were plenty of times that I started like going to my apartment gym to try and work out and failing, or trying to eat cleaner and still going to Taco Bell and just crush the value menu. So, it's just about finding that one thing that will stick. And I was lucky that I finally found it because, I can't imagine my life differently than how it is now.
I'm interested to bring this up. So, like you mentioned earlier, that you're just sort of the personality. You're an extreme personality. Like whatever you do, you're going
Absolutely.
to do it sort of full bore. And I used to say that I was like that. Like, I don't know. I think just by nature of consuming content on the internet, and we watch a lot of the same stuff. Like I've seen all the Christian Guzman and the Nick Bear, and I watch those same videos. And that's something that they say, oh, I have an addictive personality. Oh, I'm an obsessive person. And so I think I would say that sort of to latch on to that as an identity, but I'm really not like that. And I mean, I would say I have that in me a little bit, but something that I'm finding now is as I'm moving into a phase of my life where a lot of my interests are culminating in different areas outside of fitness, I've had a hard time mentally being okay with doing less focused or less quantity of fitness and workouts so that I can do other stuff. Like jujitsu is a good example of this for me. For like 3 years straight, I would go probably minimum 3 times a week. Most weeks I'd go 4, sometimes even 5, right? On top of the fitness that I was doing. And probably for the last 8 months, I've been going once or twice a week, and that's it. And for a long time, I was beating myself up over this. Like, oh, it's just all, insert all of the lame motivational cliche things. Like I wasn't putting in the work and I wasn't happy with the results that I was getting. But I'm sort of at a point where like I can't really give more to this thing right now. Like it's just not in the cards. And this process has gotten me to where I've recognized that, oh, it's okay. I feel like the story that I've told myself about my life is I am this sort of like addictive personality, go after it with everything you have type person. And I'm not really, and it's okay. And I'm wondering if you feel like because of the kind of work that you do and the kind of person that you are, if you feel like you've dug yourself in this hole where it's going to be hard to get out of, because that's how I felt, where it was like I've made everybody believe that I'm this like extreme go-getter guy, and I'm not like that. And so I've had some guilt about essentially pulling back from that. And in reality, nobody's thinking that about me, but it's just the story that I'm telling myself about it.
No, absolutely. I really, I really think I am a little bit that psychotic. That I am that person that just kind of obsessive and pours into things. Honestly, for me, it has been a similar experience for me, but just in a different way. Like my fiance is really the one who kind of keeps me in check. And we were friends for a good while before we started dating. And she would try to keep me in check then too. And I wouldn't listen because why would I? Like I'm doing my own thing. And then we started dating and she was like, no, this is not how we're going to do things. Like you're going to take care of yourself. You're going to be healthy. And, anecdotally, like in 2023, I did 75 hard. I went for 105 days because 75 isn't good enough. I don't know. I told myself some BS of like, everyone does 75. So because I go one more and blah, 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 like you said, insert cheesy crap. I got to go 105 and, like I totally thrashed my body. I lost like 30 pounds, like all of this stuff that on the internet looked like great results and like I'm a stud and I'm doing my thing. And then, I'm at home just like kind of withering away to nothing. So I think she has done a fantastic job of kind of bringing me back to center because, I tend to be a little tunnel vision. But yeah, it's hard to balance things. She is very much a believer of like, pick the one thing and you have to be great at that one thing. And while CrossFit is master of none, she's like, hey, if you want to be great at jujitsu, then like you have to be okay if your CrossFit suffers. And if you want to be great at CrossFit, you have to be okay if your jujitsu suffers, and etc. So, I'm trying to run a marathon before the end of the year. And she's like, you can't be trying to hit back squat goals and run a marathon in reality. You got to pick one or the other, work on the one a little bit, but you have to be okay with sacrifice. So yeah, I mean, I think it's great that you recognize that within yourself though, because I think we're like kind of presented with this like hard option of like, you're David Goggins, you're going hard or you're weak. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's good to kind of supplement some of that with being okay with not being perceived as superhuman all the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just talked to Dr. Isabel Meyering, and it'll be the episode that comes out before yours. And she is a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And she is a wellness coach, life coach type personnel. And I asked her, I said, what is the main thing that people overemphasize in terms of when it comes to wellness? And she said two things. It's physical health and financial success. And the reason why we prioritize those things, I guess, just in the culture and society that we live in, is because there's this hyper competitiveness, and it's obvious. It's one of the only outward things that you can express. The other things like mental health, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, and your personal relationships, those were the other four. You don't really see that when you look at a person, but for the most part, like you can tell somebody works out, you can tell somebody, if it, based off how somebody's dressed or, the car that they step out of when they go to the coffee shop, like you can see some of these financial things too. And it's interesting because that whole conversation made me connect that point we were just talking about in this one, which is that I think a lot of the stress comes from the internal voice that tells me that the fitness and the financial stuff is what's important, because I'm sort of being pulled to work on the mental and emotional and relational and spiritual stuff a little bit more, but it's almost like shunned from society, because not necessarily shunned, it's just not prioritized. And so it can be easy to make those different traits the villain and like, oh, I shouldn't be focused on that. These other two things are where the treasure really lies. But that's just not true. And I think that, as life goes, you'll always just be struggling to come up with a different iteration of what's important for you to focus on. Sometimes your relationships are great and your financial situation is great. And other times you have to direct a little bit more focus to each one. But in any case, I still think that that's worth pointing out, that if people have the same mindset that you have and at times that I have, I think just framing it a little bit differently, like if you have those feelings of guilt, like, oh, I haven't been working out so much, then you probably don't recognize that you're actually using that same energy. You're probably just directing it towards something else.
Absolutely. I think some of that stems from like physical work is hard, but also like just get up and move. And like, there's all the cheesy things about like, I've never regretted a workout. If I get up and get going, I'll get through it. But I think the mental work is just a lot harder. Like just period. It is deep. It's something you really have to focus on. Like, I can put in headphones, listen to music, tune out and go through a workout and like not have to think about a single thing. And I think a lot of the time we try to avoid some of that deep work, just because for the simple fact that it's harder than the physical work a lot of the time. So yeah, I mean, I think we could all step back and work on that a little bit. And that's definitely something that I have been shifting to in recent times as well. And just leaning on, I see all your posts of the books that you're reading, and definitely taking note of all of those, because I think reading is like the best way that I force myself to do deep work.
Yeah. Yeah. With the reading stuff, it's interesting. This is probably the root of all of the turmoil that I've been dealing with, because I started reading have you ever read Red Rising?
Mm-mm. Now I will though.
Top-notch book if you're into science. Yeah, I was gonna say you'll probably like it just from the science fiction stuff, but it's so good. And it's probably the first book that I've read since college that was just pure enjoyment. And I left that book with more philosophical and deep thoughts about existence and the way of things than I would have if I were to read insert any self-improvement book. And I realized through that I think one of the biggest mistakes in the literature world, at least especially in the self-improvement world, is that we don't take lessons from fictional stories or otherwise made up arbitrary stories. This is what martial arts movies did for you and I when we were young. Like, all of the character that I've built is based off of things like The Karate Kid or Enter the Dragon, and among other things too. But I think that the stories that we hear and learn from a young age really do impact us that deeply. And it's made me recognize, like, oh, there's actually a lot to be learned from things that might not seem like from the front they're going to be very quote unquote productive, but they're actually probably some of the most productive things that we can do. And they're way more entertaining to engage with on a regular basis.
I think that was a big thing growing up that I leaned on a lot. I don't think you're out here trying to consume self-help books, pre 21 years old, probably. Maybe some are, but I was not. I was just like I've said multiple times, Power Rangers, Star Wars, Karate Kid, Ninja Turtles, trying to learn lessons, and you don't think of it as you're learning much at the time. And then the more time you dig into it as an adult, I think that's something that's been really cool about the last 10 years or so. Pop culture as a whole thing and nostalgia has really taken off. And I always joke that, because I'm a little bit older than you. When I was in middle school, I got picked on a lot for like still liking Power Rangers and Pokemon and stuff like that. And now that's like cool. Like you're not cool if you're not into nerd culture. And, I think delving back into that stuff as an adult, you learn so much about the roots of what created you, and that it's not, it is nature versus nurture. And it's not just what our parents want us to be. It's a lot of what clicked with us as kids. And, my fiance is younger than me, and we compare a lot of notes about what worked and what didn't for us growing up. And it's funny how there are those common pieces of literature or film or TV that, really struck a chord throughout multiple, decades. So, I will lean on Star Wars until the day I die. I'll tell anyone that Star Wars is great and anyone could love it if they give it a chance. And, the Force, the Jedi, all of that. I learned so much from that, probably seems silly, as an adult, but, impacted me deeply.
I feel like I've got an idea about this, by the way, the whole like nerd stuff becoming cool. I think that I can pinpoint the exact time when this happened. So similarly, like, I think I was one of the last generations that got made fun of for doing nerd shit. Like, I solved Rubik's Cubes in middle school. I did magic tricks with cards when I was in middle school, and I got made fun of and picked on and teased a little bit for that. And like, now kids, all of my athletes that are like, that have children at the CrossFit gym, they're like doing Rubik's Cubes. And I'm like, I got made fun of for this. Like, why are they able to do this? And they're all playing video games and things like that. Right. And I'm a lifelong video game player. I played World of Warcraft from like the age of 8 to 15. I played Call of Duty, pretty intensely at a pretty high level. I've played League of Legends at a pretty high level. Do you still play games at all?
I do. Yeah.
Have you played the new Star Wars Hunters mobile game?
I haven't yet. I really want to. I got a preview of it when I was at Star Wars Celebration a year and a half ago. There's my real nerdness coming through, the Star Wars conventions. But no, I mean, it looks sick. I haven't gotten a chance to download it yet. I need to. Now I will.
It's so sick. I'm like, I think as we are talking now, I'm like top 1% right now. But I do realize I'm probably beating
Sick.
like 12-year-old kids. But in any
Doesn't
case,
matter.
I think that this happened with Fortnite. Um, I played Fortnite for like a week on my Xbox before I downloaded it on my PC and I started playing it. And when Ninja, the streamer, got super popular, right? He sort of brought it was the day he played with Drake is when everything changed. And all of the people that like teased me and made fun of me years prior were like, let's play Fortnite together. And I was pretty good because I had been playing PC games my whole life. I wasn't an insane player by any means. But anyways, it sort of changed from that point. And then, Fortnite did their whole like crossover thing, mobile platform, making it super accessible for everybody. And it became this sort of widely accepted thing that, I mean, a lot of people still are like, it's not for me, but I think it's way more accepted to be into video games and almost use it as a discipline in and of itself. But I have a theory that I think that when Ninja played with Drake in like 2019 or whenever it was, 2018, that was the day that everything changed for gamers everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, Ninja is such an interesting character too, because of the way he is just constantly kind of ebbed and flow through pop culture. But no, I mean, I was a big Fortnite gal too. It's funny because when you and I were talking about, how you were less fit when you were a teen, and it's not that you didn't like yourself, but you just had bad habits and played a lot of video games. Like that was absolutely me leading up to that like moment where I had my flip and everything. I was like Twitch streaming, like making money, Twitch streaming, playing video games all day long, whatever. And video games have kind of been something that I've come back to in like a healthy light, which is really, like a nice full circle moment because it was the thing that probably made me the most unhealthy. I was sitting around, just like munching, playing video games all day, not moving. And then I got away from it for quite a few years. And there was really like some guilt attached to me for it, where like, if I sat still for 20 minutes to play video games, I felt like I was withering away. And now it's just been something that I use to sit down for 20 minutes. And I'm like, it's okay to not need every moment of your day to be like about improving. I think we get into that, like, I must constantly Kaizen improvement mindset. And it's okay to just like veg out and play video games and watch YouTube. Like you will survive.
Yeah, on that note, I realized too recently, this was probably about a year ago at this point, how much better video games are as an adult because I re-downloaded League of Legends. I haven't played in many months, but this was about a year ago. And I went through like this 3-month period where I played like 2 or 3 times a week. And on the weekend, I reconnected with an old college buddy of mine that used to play, him and I used to play League together. And he's like in a different part of the country. Like we have no connection. And I just saw that he logged on and I messaged him. So I was like, what's up, dude? And we had a couple of beers virtually and played a couple of League games. And it was awesome. Like, and it was that same realization for me when I did that, where I was like, oh, this is actually a really productive way that I could connect with friends in a way that I like to do it. And yeah, that's such an aside, but anybody who's listening, if you haven't had drinks with your buddies and played video games, it's the best.
Yeah, you're missing out. You need to do it.
Let's come back to, I know you mentioned CrossFit entered the picture. How long ago was that? And what did that initial part of your journey look like? How did you get introduced to it?
Yeah, so that was probably 4 years ago or so. At this point, I'm pretty fit. I'm in pretty good shape. I've been kind of like doing amateur fighting and fight training, everything else. Lost all the weight. And speaking of Star Wars conventions, I was at Star Wars Celebration Chicago with my best friend, who I met at the Orlando one 2 years before, and she had been doing CrossFit. And she's like, "Hey, like I know you're psycho brained. Like you need to try CrossFit." And of course, like my ignorant ass was like, no, people get hurt. It's not good for you. Blah, blah, blah. All the things that we deal with. I was that person. And she was like, no, you're wrong. So on the way home, I watched like one of the Fittest on Earth documentaries and was immediately hooked. Just like, I was like, this stuff looks psycho. I'm in, which is funny because then, CrossFit Games documentaries are not remotely what we're doing in the local affiliate, but that's okay. It gets people hooked either way if you have that mindset. So yeah, I searched some gyms in town. It still took me a couple months to get signed up, but signed up and, never looked back. It tickles all the things that I love in fitness. I love that, it can be something like a psycho metcon. It can be a heavy strength cycle. It can be whatever you want it to be. And it always, gives me another goal to reach for. And, it's ultimately plateau proof. So it's, as a methodology, it doesn't get much better than that.
I like it so much because I think that for general population people, you're doing so many insane things that you would never even think about doing if you were to just like go to your Planet Fitness. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like you can get my fiance is a good example of this. She doesn't like to work out at all and she never will. And I thought when she started working out, I think shortly after we started dating that she would eventually like it, but she just hasn't. It's still like a check on the to-do list that just needs to get done. And like that's totally cool if that's your speed, just like doing whatever it is, moving your body. But I think for people that especially start to find this enjoyment out of the habit and process and discipline of pursuing it, is that there's something for everybody. And like I would bet to say that CrossFit's probably got more barbells in people's hands than literally any other methodology, sport, etc. on the planet. And that in and of itself is such an amazing thing.
Without a doubt. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about coaching. When anyone asks me like why I like to coach, like obviously there's the like I want to change lives. Like fitness changed my life. It's a big part of my why. My mom has battled cancer 3 times in her life. She's currently doing so again, and like that is something that's always in the back of my mind. And helping people kind of avoid that kind of health, detriment as much as they can, even though some of it is unavoidable. But from like a less deep standpoint, like one thing that I love is, I get that mom of 3 who comes in and like within 2 years can do like 5 unbroken strict pull-ups and run like a 9-minute mile. And, she gets down on herself because she failed a 125 squat clean. And I'm like, do me a favor, go to the park with your kids, ask every mom there to do a pull up and we'll see. Like, and I think there's power in getting everyday people to consider themselves athletes. And that is like something very cool that I think, you can't find almost anywhere else. You go to other, organized fitness group classes. And I don't know that people walk out like I'm an athlete, but you walk out of CrossFit after like PRing your clean and jerk or rowing a 5K and you're like, I'm doing something no one else is doing. And I think that's a really powerful piece to the programming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like going from doing no pull-ups to even doing one pull-up is insane. Like that is a profound
Absolutely.
thing because of what it takes to do that. And granted, like if you take a reasonably, a reasonably weight, maybe they're slightly overweight and they've just sort of been eating whatever, they don't have a good base of fitness. You can do that in several months, like 3 to 6 months, going from no pull-up to one. But like even still, the transformation of not just your physical body, but your mental capability and capacity is insane. And I think that because you and I engage in this all the time, and we see people get their first pull up all the time, insert first any physical thing all the time, it can be it starts to get a little bit almost watered down, but it's not lost on me the profundity of that. Like anytime anybody is PRing in the gym, which happens so often, because we're pursuing all of these different things, that should be celebrated, and we should be patting people on the back for that, and we should be congratulating people for that, because it is an amazing thing to show up and improve yourself physically and mentally, and whatever you're showing up for, you're going to improve yourself in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of tell my athletes, like, it's awesome that you get a chance to fail a PR. Like most people aren't even trying to lift heavier, to run faster, to row faster, to do these Metcons, to do more rounds in 20 minutes. Most people don't even get the opportunity to do that. And CrossFit is kind of like the ultimate way that we keep people from boxing themselves in. I think that's something that I struggled with as an athlete after I lost most of my weight. Like I'm a lifter. I'm still heavier than a lot of people who are 5'1". And so that means that I shall be good at back squat and nothing else. And, like that chip on my shoulder is something that I've chased forever. I ran a 10K a couple months ago, and that's no extraordinary feat talking to a man who's run a 100-miler. But, like for me, I was someone who could barely walk or like, you finish the day at Disney and you got to like adventure all the way out into the parking lot because they park you a million miles out. And, I was in like near tears by the end of that because I could barely walk, that far after a day of being on my feet because I was so out of shape. I had shin splints, all of this stuff. And then, I wake up on a random Saturday and or a Sunday and I run a 10K. And that's something that I never thought I would have been able to do. And that's where the CrossFit mom comes in too. She gained a lot of weight after having kids, wants to lose the weight, and, now can do far more than just lose weight. And, that's where I think my perspective as an athlete has shifted how I coach, and how my perspective as a coach has shifted how I am as an athlete.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious when coaching entered the picture for you. It sounds like you joined CrossFit as an athlete first, and then shortly after wanted to pursue coaching.
Yeah, so I was teaching martial arts at the time to like kids, just Taekwondo to kids. And I had been at Dynasty CrossFit, the affiliate that I was at, for only a couple of months when after a class one day I was leaving and the owners were finishing up their workout and they're like, "Hey, Katie, come talk to us." And, they were like, "Hey, have you ever considered coaching? Like, we know you have a coaching background. You're a big part of the community already. We always kind of joke that I'm like the mayor, I'm like shaking hands, kissing babies. And that was me even as just an athlete and community member. So, yeah, they kind of approached me about it. And I had really no thoughts of coaching when I started CrossFit. Who would? But I was like, hey, sure, why not? So got my L1. We had a pretty exhaustive internship process at my gym too, which I think is a very good thing. But yeah, so I went through that, and just it all kind of took off from there. Ended up being head coach within a couple years and getting my L2. And coaching is something I'm really passionate about, coaches development, especially because I think a good coach can completely change, someone's views on fitness.
Yeah. It's interesting that you came from it. I have like the opposite, where I was, again, started lifting when I was like 19 in college, first year. It was either my first or second semester, and I was just feeling like I didn't have any goals. So then I've stumbled upon a documentary called Where Dreams to Go to Die, where it's Gary Robbins attempting to run the Barkley Marathons. It's on YouTube. And so good. And I was like, I didn't even know people could run 100 miles. And so enter the world of ultra marathoning. I signed up and did a 50 miler. It was later in that year. It was late 2019, I believe. But when I was like a month out from the race date, I had pretty much done all the hard work. I had started experimenting late in my training with what I thought was CrossFit. I had seen a couple of the CrossFit documentaries, and I was getting really tired of lifting for an hour to an hour and a half every day. It just didn't feel like a very good use of my time when I was running so much. And so for my strength training, I started doing higher intensity, shorter CrossFit E type stuff. And through that, I just fell in love with working out like that. I hadn't really ever pushed myself like that in a long time, if not ever. Like I said, I played soccer growing up, and I was always pretty out of shape until like my last year of playing sports. And so I didn't really know what it was like to work out intensely until I did CrossFit. And then I was like, I love this feeling. I'm going to keep doing it. And my master plan was, as soon as I finished my 50 miler, I was going to get my L1, which is what I did. I ran it in November, and then I got my L1 in December of 2019. And I got back to my college, and I was like, this is my come up story, origin story. I emailed the CrossFit gyms in town and was like, hey, I just got my L1. Like, I want to intern with you. Like, I'll mop the floors type stuff. The gym that I work at now brought me in. They were looking for extra help at the time. And similarly, I interned for quite some time, coached my last year of college, and then took the head coaching role when I graduated. But something that's been cool for me to explore, and as I've gotten to know more people like yourself who are coaches or owners, is everybody has their own unique story when it comes to, stumbling upon CrossFit. But something that is, I think, integral to everybody who sticks around is usually what you and I have gone through, where you did it and you were like, there's some magic here with the methodology and the programming and the things that you can get better at. You mentioned earlier all the sacrificial nature of doing things. If you want to do jujitsu, you're going to have other things take a back seat. I felt like CrossFit was a place where that wasn't entirely true. Like, you could have it all as long as you didn't want to be like world class at one specific thing. you have a place where you can go to improve at various different things, build characteristics and attributes of physical fitness and other things that have such a wide carry over to so many different things that we could get our hands on in life. And that really appealed to me at a core level when I first got into it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, it's cheesy and Kool-Aidy, but I think CrossFit is something that like almost can't be explained unless you do it. And the power is really beyond just the methodology, because the culture component and the community is something that just changes the whole game. And I was really lucky. The affiliate that I came up in, Dynasty CrossFit, um, Sherman Merrick's our owner. He was like a regionals athlete many, many, many years ago, and opened his own affiliate, just used to train, like opened it out of his garage, had a smaller location and then the larger location that I ended up in. And I think I thought that was CrossFit. Like I thought Dynasty was how every gym was. And while there are pieces at, that affiliate that I can find at other ones, we ended up closing up shop at the beginning of the year. And I was briefly at another affiliate, and you learned very quickly that the power is really in the people. And like, while, the community was pretty great at the other one, like I just felt like a lot of ownership wasn't shooting for the same things that were like principal things that I believe you have to go for in CrossFit. Like you have to push your athletes. You can't just let them be okay with settling every day. And it's like, it's such a fine line, because you also can't, I want my athletes to come in as much as possible. And some days that means that they're just coming in and moving. But if they're constantly just coming in and moving, they're missing the magic of the thing. So I find it really, as my duty as a level 2 who, aspires to get her L3 soon, to really push the boundaries of what a great affiliate can be and what great coaching can be, because the methodology is magical for people like me and you who are kind of, want to get after it, want to push themselves, want to do that hard metcon. But for the CrossFit mom, or, the guy who was a washed up D3 college athlete, has had 3 kids and is now in the gym, for those people, you have to find the magic for them sometimes. And that's what gets them to stick around. And, it really can be the difference between changing someone's life and not. And, the power of coaching is something I really believe in. And that's what makes CrossFit magical.
I would just reiterate the importance of that, like the culture of it. And similarly, the gym that I'm at is literally the first gym that I've ever been a part of. Like the first time I stepped foot in a CrossFit gym was when I was getting my L1. Like that, I liked the workout. That's awesome. And then I realized that it was way, way more. And, going on vacation or doing other things, traveling around, you drop into gyms. And I haven't been to too many, I will say, but every time I go, I'm like, nah, this place kind of sucks. Like, not to knock anything on them, but it's just, you're right. I think that CrossFit itself is like a really beautiful thing, but you have to have the right people and you have to be in the right community to really see where it excels. And I think that's what keeps most people showing up. And I actually even tell a lot of my athletes that when they start, it's like, hey, you want this thing, like whether it's weight loss or strength gains or fitness improvements, but I just want you to know that like after a while, you're going to not even worry about that thing anymore, because you're just going to want to come hang out with your friends and encourage other people and just sort of be a part of this thing that we're all doing. And I think that switch, when people get to that point, they're in, and it's like whatever their fitness goals are, they're as good as accomplished. Time just hasn't caught up to them yet. And I think you're right though, that community aspect, people that you're around, is really what it comes down to, whether you're going to be successful or not.
Yeah, I think CrossFit gives this like inherent competition. And like sometimes some people are like born with that and they want to compete, and some people, are a little shy to that. And I think that's something I found in other affiliates, is like you have to define what competition is for each athlete as a coach. And so that might be like local comps, wanting to make quarterfinals, whatever, like your standard competition stuff. But that might just be like getting better than you were. And that's that's really the crux of CrossFit, right? That's why we have our named workouts that we've been doing for over a decade, is so that, our owner Sherman did hell in and broke his time that he had set, or his, yeah, his time that he had set, like 7 years before, even though he had just turned 40. And like, that's magical, rad stuff. And, that's where you have to find what competition means for each person, because you need them to show up every day to want to compete for like the best version of themselves, even if, that doesn't look like your conventional competition. Because I think that's like one of the biggest red flags to me is if you walk into a gym and the owners like are terrified of like creating RX athletes or like being competitive. They're like, we're not a competitive gym. It's like, no, calm down. It's going to be okay. Like, you do not want to create CrossFit Games athletes. That's cool. It's also very hard to do that. We're talking about a very elite group, but you have to push, each athlete. And, like the power of the CrossFit Open is we're trying to help every person each year get better. And, it's okay to push yourself.
Is there anything that you have learned, or perhaps you didn't expect to learn that you have learned about coaching? Doesn't necessarily need to be specific to CrossFit, but before you got into it?
I think coaching is a lot more emotional than I ever thought it would be. I think the toll that it takes on someone mentally, like there was times a couple years ago where I'm pulling like 50-hour weeks. We're low staffed. I have, luckily I have a lot of personal training clients, which is a great thing. I'm making great money, but I'm physically drained. I'm doing 20,000 steps a day kind of thing. But when I get home at night, it's not the physical toll. Like it is definitely the emotional toll. And I think I create some of that myself. I mentioned the mayor thing. Like I know that I'm trying to ask each person about their day, and I'm trying to remember that they had a test last week. And, we live in a college town in Gainesville. So that kind of stuff is super important to each student that comes in. And, I get home and, it's hard to turn that off, I think, sometimes. And especially when you have your own personal life stuff going on. Like I mentioned, my mom has fought cancer a couple times, and that's something that's like pretty well known to my athletes. And I'm okay with that because, anecdotally, I had a athlete come in late one day. She's stretching and she's like, I'm just taking the class. And she's like, Kaity, like, I was late because, like we found out my dad has cancer and like, I'm really upset. And, that's why I want people to know that stuff so they can lean on me. But it's also hard when things are hard and people realize that, you're down and they're like, how are things? How's your mom? How's whatever? And so I think you think of it as a career or something you can do to make money, but because you're passionate, you pour emotional support into it as well. And mentally and emotionally, it can be, very draining. And that's definitely something that I've had to try to adjust over the years and not give too much of myself, because I think I do tend to be the kind of person that, wants to be there for each person. But, there's only so much water to pour out of the bucket at any given moment.
Yeah, I would just reiterate and reemphasize all that stuff you just said. I'm sure, have you seen Samurai Jack?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm rewatching Samurai Jack right now. I watched it sporadically through my youth, but I don't think I ever watched it all the way through. And I'm going through that right now. The reason why I bring this up is because I feel the exact same way sometimes about the stuff that I'm doing. And I was just talking to my fiance. I think I've pointed it, and this is a cool full circle moment because it's like by way of me watching this cartoon show. Something that's really beautiful about that TV show is I feel like it's a commentary on loneliness where, Samurai Jack is thrust into this weird world where he doesn't know anybody or know anything. And he's trying to struggle and make his way back to overcome this big challenge that he's faced with. And I feel like that is what it's like to be a coach, because I feel like it's lonely. Like all day. So I wake up early, usually before anybody else gets up. I do, my daily disciplines. I read, I have my coffee, do my stuff, right? I go to the gym. And then when I'm at the gym, whether I'm doing one-on-one training or I am coaching a group class, I almost exist on the outside of it. I'm before people and I'm leading the group and I'm making sure things are managed. And all of the social stuff is happening outside of me. And then, like I come home and I'll have lunch and I'll be hanging out with my dog or whatever. And, the podcast, I feel like, this is a great opportunity to connect, but even still, it's like very one-sided. I'm asking you questions and, you're answering them. And again, I'm connecting with people in a lot of ways, but it almost feels like, because I'm so mindful of like how things need to go, how the workout needs to go, how the time needs to be managed, how this conversation needs to go, the next question that I'm trying to ask, it almost feels like I can't be in the thing. And so sometimes at the end of the day, when I'm done and I'm just wiped out, again, it's not the physical challenge for me. It's that I get done and I'm like, wow, I feel like I didn't really connect with anybody at all today. And I think as a coach specifically, it's super important to identify the things that you can do in your life to help overcome some of those negative attributes associated with it. So for me, it's finding ways to connect with people outside of the gym, or finding ways to have a conversation with somebody where I'm not sort of the leader or the guide that is present. And it sounds like you kind of have a similar thing, but that's the feeling that I associate with it. It feels very lonely. It's like a I'm all by myself type thing, and it's hard to know how to manage some of that stuff.
There's this meme, this silly meme that's like, everyone always asks, where's Godzilla, not how's Godzilla? And I used to joke that that's like how it feels to be a coach sometimes. My fiance was just a member at the gym when we met and we became friends and everything else. And I always tell people, like, one of the things that like really spoke to me about her is one time she was like, how's your day going? You ask everyone how their day is. Like, how's your day? And I realized that she quite literally was the first person to ask me that question in like days. And I like play this game where I'm like, what'd you have for lunch? And I'd ask everyone. And then, like, you know, the last person goes, and then it's just like crickets. And I think you accept that as coach, but it doesn't make it like any less sad when you sit back and think about it. And you know, no, it's very lonely. I think an empty, quiet gym is like one of the most beautiful things in the world. But also, it's like, man, it would be cool to just like sit down and have a real conversation with someone that didn't have like a barbell in between us. And you know, I'm trying to quickly ask them what they had for lunch so that I can then like get to the next person and cue the next person. And yeah, I think that's something I'm like still mastering. I think that's something I am terrible at, and I try to find things that, you know, can supplement that outside of the gym. I think, you know, I'm very blessed to have a great fiance who is probably like the point person on that always. And she is very in tune to how I'm feeling and can tell, you know, she's like, what do you want for dinner? We can have this, this, and that. And then she just like sees my eyes glaze over and she's like, you know what? I don't think you want to be the point person on anything else today. So we're just going to go have blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, you're perfect. Thank you. So I think it's, you know, surrounding yourself with good family and friends and, you know, partners who are going to make sure that you keep your head on straight, because yeah, I mean, it gets lonely, it's taxing, but it's also like so rewarding, right? Like I'll that story about the member coming in and telling me about her dad, that was probably 3 years ago. And I think about it like fairly often, you know, and it's good to have those kind of stories when you are down, to realize that, you know, it's not for nothing.
Yeah, and I don't know if there is mastering it. I feel like it's a cost that's associated with this kind of position, and 100% like you need to manage it, because if it I'm a good example of that. I feel like the emotional turmoil that I've experienced and stress over the last several weeks has been because I just didn't think about that what we're talking about right now. I just kind of went about it without bringing awareness to the fact that I need to connect with people more. And then all of a sudden I feel horrible and I'm like, why is this? And now I've identified it. And so 100%, like, I think you need to manage it, but I do think that it will always be in this state of limbo where you're it's very hard to do enough to offset that completely. And I think that it's one of the costs associated with the kind of role that you and I have chosen for ourselves, which is that you at times might feel a little bit lonely or separated, and or just straight up exhausted from making decisions for people all day, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, it is definitely like a cost that comes with the job, but I think the negatives are far outweighed by the positives, at least in that mindset. But yeah, you have to keep yourself from getting burnt out. That's always the first and foremost thing I tell a new coach.
If you could sum up, I know, lifelong experience thus far, what is one sort of reoccurring theme that you feel like pops up a lot throughout your life that you think it's important to share with other people?
I think the biggest thing for me is never be afraid to pivot and change. I think a lot of people settle for good enough, or they say, well, this is how I've always been. Like, how often do you hear someone say, like, well, that's just how Joel is. And, I think that's a nightmare. I don't think, you never have to stay the way you are. If you want to make a change, make the change. If you want to make a pivot, make a pivot. And, I recently was interviewing with someone in North Carolina because my fiance and I are about to relocate. And he was like looking at my resume and he's like, so you nannied for 6 years, you ran a social media marketing for 7 nanny agencies, you taught martial arts, you did personal training, and then you're the head coach of a CrossFit gym. And that's all within the last like 10 years. And, I'm like, yeah, I raised my nephew. I helped raise my nephew. I enjoy social media because I think it's like very analytical and there's no feelings behind it. And then I like helping people because I turned my life around and I want to help people. And all of the things that I've done in life has simply been based off the fact that I'm not afraid to change. And I think we are stubborn and we have ego and we think that we know best. And we often do not, hardly ever, at least for myself. So, I think it's about being coachable and being willing to pivot because life, we say life is too short, but in reality, my best friend and I joke that I've been 10 different people in the time that she's known me and that I'll be 10 to 12 more in the next 10 years. And, I think it is important to embrace each version of yourself as it comes because you're missing out on great things when you try to stay stagnant.
Kaity, let's bring this one home. I appreciate the hell out of you. I think this was an awesome conversation. Where can people go to find more from you and the content and things like that you put out?
Yeah, I have had a blast, Joel. So thanks for having me on. It was a good conversation. We'll have to sync up on more books and stupid 80s martial arts films and video games. But I'm on Instagram, Cobra Kaity. I spell it a little weird because I wanted to be edgy in middle school. I don't know. So Cobra spelled normal, but then Kaity, Kaity. YouTube as well, Cobra Kaity Fitness on TikTok. It's all kind of the same. Caitlin Mason, if you get adventurous and want to search the whole name. But always here to help people to have chats. I think people think that to have a chat, you got to pay money with fitness people, but nah, I just like talking. So anybody who wants to have a chat about martial arts or CrossFit or books, hit me up.
Right on. Information is free. That's what I always tell people. I'll give you anything you ask for, but if you want me to coach you, then you have to pay. No.
Then you got to pay up.
But we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Good People. If you guys are watching on YouTube, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. If, while you were listening, you enjoyed, please share this episode with someone you love, perhaps your grandma. We'll see you next time.